Daniel Hamilton is the Sustainability Program Manager for the City of Oakland, and he manages the city's comprehensive sustainability efforts through the Energy and Climate Action Plan. He's focused on bringing sustainability solutions to the City of Oakland, its residents, and its businesses. And Daniel's here to let us know how Oakland was represented at the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris.
So you may be wondering why on earth I'm up here to talk about Paris and COP21 in front of NCRA. And, well, really, I heard you're just really good drinkers, and I wanted to be here at the end so I could join you. But beyond that, mostly I wanted a free trip to Paris. And so I lobbied for that in a variety of ways. I talked to my mayor, Libby Schaaf, about a variety of things that we do on electric vehicle charging and solar panels, energy efficiency in buildings, all these great community outreach programs. She said, yeah, but why did we get invited to Paris? Why on earth am I one of 10 cities representing all of the US cities in Paris? What is it that Oakland does that's so special? And I've learned I had to answer that question, so I made Mark Gagliardi do it for me. And the answer is what I'm going to talk about today and what Libby Schaaf was talking about in Paris at more presentations than any other US mayor at this conference. What were they asking US cities to talk about? What did this group focused on greenhouse gas emissions really want to hear about? What they wanted to hear about was upstream emissions. Seriously. I got a mayor to say upstream emissions over and over. So, these are the main things that she thought she was going to be talking about when she went there. There were 500 cities from 115 different countries. All of them are where the actions are happening. 70% of the energy emissions come from the cities. The majority of people live in cities. And the technology that's going to drive solutions to climate change is going to come from cities. She thought that meant solar panels. We didn't realize until on the plane on the way there that she was going to be more interested in talking about how you minimize upstream emissions from waste. And I'm going to show you how we got her to that message in only a 12-hour plane flight. But Oakland is already a leader. We've set what are called 80 by 50 goals, 80%, actually 83% emissions reductions by 2050. That's the international standard for where we need to go to limit our temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius, which is the internationally agreed target, not necessarily the best target, but hey, it's the one we're going to work on. But that second bullet point there is the big thing that we pointed out to her over and over, and it really stuck and resonated with the crowd there as well. Core emissions are the way that normal greenhouse gas emissions are counted. It's everything within the boundary. You count out the methane coming out of the landfill, you count out the carbon dioxide coming from vehicles and homes and burning natural gas and power plants, you end up with a number. That's the core number. Cities compare themselves to that. In that, we have among the lowest per capita emissions anywhere in the country, lower than San Francisco, lower than Boston, lower than a lot of the global leaders within this. We're only slightly behind Seattle, but as soon as you all find 100% hydropower for us, we'll catch them too. But I told her to ignore that number. It's a crap number and it's not real. Cities are cheating at this. And the reason they're cheating is something that you all know and deal with on a daily basis. The stuff we buy is stuff we're responsible for. If they make a widget in China and ship it over to the Port of Oakland and it gets on a train and goes to your community and is bought in Target by one of your residents, you're responsible for those emissions, right? Your community, you drove that purchase. So one of the things Mark did was show me exactly how we can count that. I didn't realize that you guys were so smart at doing this. That turns out your group is the one that figured this out. This was the solid waste community that did this, that started looking at the emissions factors of everything from all of its point of origin all the way through distribution, through the end of the life cycle, into the waste stream and out of it, whatever form it goes out in. We did that and we came up with a 16% emissions reduction pattern from that. And you know what the big difference was? I know this is going to shock all of you in this room. It was waste. Methane emissions from our landfill was about 90,000 tons a year by saving a lot of reduction in material landfill from that. When we switched it out and included all those upstream emissions, it went from 90,000 tons to more than 300,000 tons and accounted for the majority of Oakland's emissions reductions, all from waste reduction. Guess what? GHGs get money. People care about this. Are your sustainability directors talking about this? Are your politicians talking about this as their greenhouse gas? It's more effective than solar. It's more effective than electric vehicles. It's more effective than a lot of things when you start to use this version of math. We also did consumption emission inventories to show that off. So as I mentioned, the core analysis is what you do to compare among cities. We did that. We also did these consumption inventories to show other cities how you can count this. And we're now out spreading this message and hopefully getting more and more cities to start looping this in and making this the standard globally for how you compare these emissions profiles of cities. And in 2 months, we did 6 inventories: 2005, 2010, 2013, core, and consumption. These normally take about 2 months each. We did 6 of them just so we could talk about it in Paris. So lots of Oakland folks participated in this, and very heavily the solid waste team within Oakland. And finally, we wanted a bunch of money, and all of the funders were there. Bill Gates committed more than $1 billion to the effort while the Paris conference was going on. Bloomberg was there, a lot of the big philanthropists, Kresge and Doris Duke Foundation and Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and all of the folks who were interested in these sustainability things were there and trying to figure out the best way to give out money. I was the only one there talking about waste. I was the only one in North America talking about waste. Your European counterparts love to talk about this already. You guys probably all know that, but it was fun being the only American city who could talk to the Europeans about this issue. But it's a compelling message, because our emissions are about 2.6 million tons a year in Oakland under a standard model. When you incorporate all those upstream emissions and everything else associated with waste, it goes up above 7 million. So when you talk about the scale of emissions reductions that you can do, that AB 1045 talk you heard earlier about 5 million metric tons being reduced by the application of compost, well, we did more than 300,000 tons a year just in Oakland alone through diversion programs. It is feasible, and we're showing off ways that you can do that, and people like big numbers, including our mayor, so she talked about them a lot. So I mentioned that our emissions are low. Here's what that really means. 68% below the national average, 44% below the California average. We're better than a lot of the other cities. We're the blue line at the bottom. I understand this is a little bit hard to read. The point is, we rock. Sorry to call out Cleveland at the top, but Cleveland's got a poor, sad electric grid that runs mostly on coal, and despite their best efforts, their emissions are really high. One day, Seattle, one day. We're doing this emission reduction while we grow. That top gray line is our population. The blue line is GDP at a regional level. So GDP was growing, population was growing, and our emissions went down 16% all while that was happening. That's a pretty compelling story. Lots of people say, well, yeah, the recession is why your emissions went down. This is all about slowdowns in economic activity. A lot of it was. But we've been able to keep that going, and the data, preliminary data from beyond 2013, which is the most recent year we could measure, suggests that it's continuing even as the rapid economic growth of the last couple of years has been occurring. So this is what she actually talked about. A lot of people said, what happened in Paris? What was it really like on the ground? Well, these are the type of sessions. This is the way things were themed when going on there. First one was called Tale of Three Cities. There was a city council member from Kotzebue, Alaska. That's the picture of Kotzebue, Alaska. The message of that was, enjoy it. Your kids won't see it. Simply won't be there. And that council member didn't talk about her city disappearing, which it is. They've already lost more than half of their land area to sea level rise up in the Bering Sea. But the fact that it already kills people there. Thinning sea ice. In a lot of these villages up there, ice hunting is a fairly standard part of the way of life. Not just that the ice is disappearing, it's thinning, people fall through. That's actually resulted in mortalities there. It's a very human side of this story that doesn't get told very often. And we were also up with Copenhagen just to make sure we didn't get too big for our britches in Oakland and think we were really a global leader. Copenhagen is the global leader. US cities, to get really progressive, are trying to find ways to go zero net energy or carbon neutral by 2050. Nobody's figured out how to do it. Copenhagen says 2025. 9 years from now, they think they can be completely carbon positive. Copenhagen rocks. The next panel, Mayor Schaaf, Tom Steyer, one of our local billionaires here in the Bay Area, the director of the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and the sustainability directors of Kellogg's and Google to talk about the business opportunities that adapting to climate change will present. Turns out a lot of people plan to make a lot of money off of this, and it's a great thing to be able to show off just how many people, especially here in the Bay Area, plan to make their fortunes by helping to save the world. You guys are all in this category except, well, none of you are going to get paid highly. But a lot of other people who believe the same stuff will, and we can be happy for them. Subnationals leading the way was the only one we all had universal agreement on, had the worst title. Subnational? We couldn't get the states, regions, and cities to all agree on what their name should be, so this is where we ended up. Anyway, it was Libby Schaaf, Governor Jerry Brown, the new environment minister for Canada, and the mayor of Vancouver, up there talking about everything from coal export terminals and cities. I can't imagine where that question came from. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, thank you. I'm glad there's still somebody who doesn't. But talking about why national level agreements, international level agreements like the Paris climate change talks were fantastic, but it was really about what city and state and regional partnerships could do. And these things are largely driven by staff level improvements in our operations and how we handle everything from building new buildings to doing permit approvals to land use authorities to waste management on these things. It was phenomenal that in this kind of setting with these kind of folks, the single biggest point that she talked about on there for how a city leads the way in this is by counting its greenhouse gas emissions differently and prioritizing things that make meaningful difference, not the things that are shiny and have the best PR. She was talking about compost. A mayor in Paris talking about compost. I was back in the back giddily jumping up and down as she did this. And I wasn't alone. She did 4 interviews on international TV after that talking about compost. Cities were there. It's better than Where's Waldo with this thing. There are 400 global mayors on that staircase. That's Paris City Hall. It was built around 1300. And it's just a phenomenal building. That was the highlight of my trip in there. Not only did we get to see mayors from around the world come together and glad hand and whatnot, but Leonardo DiCaprio walked by me and Al Franken pushed me out of the way. I got an excuse me from Al Franken. And the point of all this is to let you know, I am a total greenhouse gas nerd. I wanted to talk about nothing but the numbers while there, but that's why they don't put me up in front of these meetings to speak. They put up people like mayors because they know how to translate messages very effectively to that. And what she said over and over again in front of all of these audience, in front of translators, and dealing with this amazing group of people that wanted nothing more than to be part of the most historic landmark agreement on climate change in the history of mankind. On that, what she said is, we need to focus more on waste diversion, we need to focus on composting, and we need to stop making these things just about the high-profile items, and we need to do a better job of really driving the stuff that works. And that's why she sent me since then to talk with groups from China, Korea, India, to spread the message, not about Oakland being great, not about her leadership as a mayor, but in fact she wants to talk about the great work that the Zero Waste Oakland team does in helping us reach these long-term GHG reductions.
Questions?
Everybody's ready for the beer. You know, it was surprising, but among the cities there, the cities largely didn't want to admit to their own number because nobody is getting close to their 2020 goals. And this was a period of shame, I think, for the cities coming together with this. And no, the cities talked about expanding electric vehicle infrastructure. They talked about putting more solar panels on roofs. And occasionally they talked about building out transit systems. Waste was an entirely overlooked topic outside of Libby. And she got to the point, I think about our 4th presentation there when she was doing a launch product for ICLEI to do their greenhouse gas counting, internationally make it free for all cities to use this software to do this kind of analysis in there. The head of the Air Resources Board of California came up to me and said, why in the fuck do I keep hearing about Oakland everywhere I go? You guys are why. I'd love to be able to answer that question in detail. Truly, I read up everything that Mark Gagliardi sent me on Zero Waste Europe. He's really the expert in there, so maybe he wants to yell from the rafters on this. But no, my expertise in this area, I cover a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, and I just learned about what Europe was doing for the sake of this conference. So there are others in the room that know more than I, so I don't think I'd feign an expert answer for all of you on that. But whoever wants to buy Mark a beer, I will take it from him and drink it while he explains the answer. Thanks a lot.